I should note that the examples are misleading in one respect. They seem to point to a gender difference, that it is possible to override the kinds of claims a mother might base on biological connection, whereas in the father's case, it is precisely his biological ties to his children that form the basis of claims and liabilities. In fact, one can equally easily find counterexamples. Imagine it, for instance, as a contest between genetic and birthing motherhood. Surrogacy disputes may in lay opinion turn on which biological criteria should prevail. Biology was by tradition the basis of maternity, and far from ignoring biological connection in the case of mothers. Disputes may be construed in terms of whether one biological process has the superior claim over the other. Or one could cite the American Supreme Court judge who in 1989 ruled against the paternity suit of a putative natural father, where blood tests indicated 98.07% a probability of paternity, on the grounds that his case left unchallenged the relevant state law as to the connections under which a child born to a married woman is presumed to be the child of her husband. I should add that the judgment itself was contested, as was the place of tradition. Something of an altercation ensued between the ruling and dissenting judges over the value of what were at one point called historical traditions. The ruling judge claimed that on his side he not only had general societal tradition regarding the rights of the natural father, but a more specific tradition in legal precedent where cases had rested upon the historic respect. Indeed, sanctity will not be too strong a term traditionally accorded to the relationship that developed within the unitary family. The dissenting judge objected that what the deeply rooted traditions of the country are is arguable, and that reasonable people can disagree about the content of particular traditions. With the reference to biological maternity, I have introduced the term tradition. Of course, we might want to reserve the concept of tradition for what is taken for granted and is thus not open to discursive controversy. Clearly, this does not apply to the term itself. There are things being taken for granted here, but when they are named as tradition, they cease to have that taken for granted status. What is of interest then is precisely the rhetorical place that tradition occupies in disputes such as this. Operating as a kind of value in itself, it joins an array of other values, notably in this example choice. Thus may it contribute to the sense that quite contradictory foundations are being claimed for people's relationship to one another. I do not propose to resolve these contradictions, nor to draw out of them some single thread of commonality. There are values here that I would want to call cultural in the anthropological sense, but they are not simply reducible to what these different positions might have in common. Rather, the phenomenon I wish to describe is exactly the way in which a diversity of possibilities is sustained. There is one very simple cultural gambit by which people reconcile diversity with the fact that what they value are their values. The idioms say it all. The people who are uttering remarks of the kind just quoted imagine their society is going somewhere. That is, anything may be taken as a sign of a social trend. Whether one is defending tradition or promoting new freedoms, whether one sees more choice about one or less of it, the world is thought to be always on the move. As a consequence, other people's prejudices, opinions, assumptions can be seen as a movement towards or away from what one values oneself. The effect of this cultural assumption is twofold. First, however, disparate people's ideas or actions. They can always be understood as showing a trend towards something. The values any individual person holds in turn afford a measure of divergence or convergence. Second, the idea of trend itself subsumes a kind of journeying unity. Whatever diverse bits and pieces it is made up of, society as such is inevitably and for better or for worse going forward. Thus, what a social scientist may discern as a social trend may also involve the valuing of society itself. In commenting on the social costs of genetic welfare, the writer in the field of policy studies and disability suggests that a vision of genetic intervention is coming to displace a social vision of the world. Meeting Gov. 1991. Values traditional and modern. But what is this society and who are these people with their values? The examples I have plucked out of a burgeoning field of literature on the implications of what are known as the new reproductive and new genetic technologies. The field I serve as an exemplar of a wider cultural universe. This universe is a universe of discourse I call Euro-American. The awkwardness of the hybrid term conveys its applications as both wider and narrower than anything one might wish to attribute to the citizens of Northern Europe and North America. It belongs, in any case, in the first instance to their works rather than to their persons. Their works often convey a reflexive anxiety to say something true about the world, to a mode at once factual, literate, and literary. Taking everything and taking nothing for real, and a seeming liberty to cull evidence from qualitatively different data. They are produced by the people who belong to the class which frames legislation. They define the words that go into the dictionaries, see themselves as defending public and personal libraries, and contest at every turn the assumptions built into all their practices. Social engineering, Simon Bauman, 1991, calls their unfinished business. Insofar as they are known by their works, Euro-Americans have existed ever since the fears of them voiced the desire to make the kind of society they desire, with the important proviso that such a society will not be a reflection of desire but will reflect the needs of the human being for which it existed. Now, where else are the signs of what those needs might be but in trends backward or forwards? It is hardly original to say that if Euro-Americans thereby invented modernity, they reinvented tradition as pre-modern. Modernism consists in, among other things, the difference between the modern and the traditional, hence the ironic concept of traditional society. No society to which modern might apply the epithet traditional could of course know itself that way. That is not just because its members do not articulate what is traditional as opposed to what else is true of themselves. It is also that they are highly unlikely to have made society their project. Making society into a project, not the polis or a kingdom or the state, but society, is where Indo-Americanism began. Now, insofar as this enterprise was thought to bring a new threshold of awareness, along with the product came a new form of endeavor or ability, modernism. Traditional becomes the epithet applied to those in a state of existence before such awareness. To paraphrase Anthony Giddens, 1991, the traditional is characteristically pre-modern, presenting along with all its institutions a society not open to self-awareness, its certainties unchallenged, whether likable, even nostalgic encompassment of other orders of being. Now the most successful pursuits of modernity have been found in those modernist regimes. I refer to cultural regimes that have negotiated traditions as a source of special values. Such values may be protected as the kind of raw material on which moderns build, like the traditional family that is also the basis upon which the individual citizen goes out into the enterprising world. The citizen must, of course, do his or her bit of ensure that those traditional values are also there as a future resource for others. In fact, as we have known for the Thatcher years, back to tradition may be the best way forward. One interesting consequence follows. This friendly encompassment of traditions implies that any Euro-American can look around present circumstances and detect what is traditional and what is not. Since the traditional is substantively equated with what was a history, hence the doubly loaded historical traditions to which the disputing judges appealed, there may appear to have been more of it in the past. Yet there seems very widespread agreement that certain cultural forms, such as kinship and family life, are continuous with the past, whereas others break with it. Hence the new in the new technologies. Were one to take these substantives literally, one could be forgiven for imagining that the cumulative effect of time, the direction society is heading in, will end in a situation where there was no more tradition left and one lived in a roughly most post-traditional society. Euro-Americans will not, of course, take them literally. They know that traditions in the plural are invented as fast as they disappear. But in addition, they also know that without being embedded in traditional values of some kind, the best efforts of modernity will not lead to greater values, to greater human happiness. In the same way as it is necessary for contracts to be embedded in non-contractual relations in order to work, so in that view must the value put on innovation and change remain responsive to the human needs which older values enshrined. The point is nicely expressed in remarks made to Janet Edwards, 1993, in Old Town. Gametes, that is, eggs and sperm, made newly thinkable as objects of reproductive medicine, should have names, that is, have their identity acknowledged as an identity embedded in other persons. Society on the move, then, showing this or that trend, registers itself to Euro-Americans in terms of, among other things, attention between what can be taken for traditional and what can be taken for modern. To be at both poles at once will seem impossible, but that is also one way of imagining what may otherwise be thought of as a contradiction. Just such a contradiction is pointed out by Janet Dolgin, 1990 1990B, a feminist commentator trained in the States in both law and anthropology. During her scrutiny of arguments surrounding women's claims to motherhood, particularly as they have been contested in the U.S. courts, she points out that no headway can be made in untangling the basis of current law unless one does indeed recognize certain fundamental contradictions and tensions lying within it. The most fundamental, she says, is between one based on set roles and biological certainties and one based on negotiation and choice. 1998. And that in turn is inexplicable unless one realizes the historical trends that have been going on within the law. She appeals to an English jurist for illumination. Current understandings of the family can be contextualized historically and sociologically in light of a fundamental shift described by Sir Henry Maine more than 100 years ago, from a universe based on relations of status to a universe based on relations of contract. 1998, original emphasis. The difference between these universes may appear radical. The case of the American boy who wishes to divest his mother of her parental rights could be framed in terms of just such a difference. One could say that the mother's claims were vested in a position she held by status, while he was claiming that an implicit contract, as implied in the desire of parents to nurture and bring up their child, had been broken by her negligence, and he wished to embark on an explicit contractual arrangement of his own making. The argument Dolgin takes from Maine, however, is that the difference indicates two poles of a societal movement. Indeed, the starting point of Maine's own interest was the direction in which he observed opinion and society moving. There are few general propositions concerning the age to which we belong. The date is 1861, which seemed at first sight likely to be received with readier concurrence than the assertion that the society of our day is mainly distinguished from that of preceding generations by the largeness of the sphere which is occupied in it by contract. 1870.